That intro just gives me chills, Aaron.
Every time.
Never without fail, every time. Good to see, ladies and gentlemen.
Chills is one word for it.
Could be a neurological condition too. I don't know. Well, today we're going to talk about identity and access management, Aaron, or identity management. Is there anything more important than this topic in security? I think it's a pretty important topic.
I would say that it's equally as important as some others. I don't know that it's more important, but
it's equally as what's more important than identity. And so yet it was innovative the first time I heard it, but I'm old. It's probably 10 years ago now, but identity is the new perimeter is the concept.
I would agree with that, presuming that you've sorted out your perimeter. Now, I would argue that that's not necessarily the case.
Well, anyway, so identity, that's our topic for today. Identity and access management, and some of the key concepts and how to make it not suck, because I've seen a lot of failure in this space. It's just usernames and passwords, right? How hard could it be? But we're going to dig into that today, how to make it less bad and organize.
I think we might have some threads to pull on after this too. We may have some follow-ups here.
Yeah, well, that's always good when we don't have to think too much about future topics. So anywho, here we go. Identity and access management. Do we need an operative definition? Do you think? I think people understand what it is.
Yeah, maybe. Right. I think people have like an ethereal sense of it,
right?
But to put it into words and kind of break it down into its elements, maybe not.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes this topic tough, is that it's deceptively like usernames and passwords and stuff, and
that's a piece of identity.
Yeah, but having said that, I also find even amongst security professionals, like, what's the difference between authentication and authorization is like, I think if you grabbed 10 people in IT and said, what's authentication and what's authorization? I don't think.
Well, maybe let's simplify. I like to get down to the simple, and so people are going to be like, well, that's technically not accurate. But I'm interested in like a working definition more than an academically accurate definition of it. So I'll go with my few that I see in there. So definitely authentication, and we can break these down a little bit. Authorization, directory services, some form of provisioning, deprovisioning function. Hopefully some automation there. And then like some ongoing governance processes, like even basic ones. So to me, it's like kind of like bundling all of those things together is identity and access management.
Yeah. I'm a simple man. I might dumb it down even further. Maybe dumb it down, it's not the right term, but I think sometimes about, we can talk about whatever technologies or methods, but what are we trying to accomplish in this space? And there's probably more, but off the top of my head, there are kind of two things that I think about that we're trying to accomplish. And one of those, the more security, of when I put on my security, don't let bad things happen to my organization. This is the most secure system would be the one that nobody can log into.
Do we power off? Yeah.
It's completely isolated. How do we log into that? You can't.
I formatted it.
But I had a boss who's kind of famously has this, the principles of this talk that says the principles of security are pretty simple, and he has a handful of them. And one of them is complicate unauthorized access. So it's the make it hard for people to get into systems who shouldn't be in them.
Yeah, but sometimes we inadvertently make it hard for people who should be in
Yeah,
the
right.
systems. Then they go like they're linked together.
Yeah. And that to me is on the, I think sometimes it's even more of an IT principle, but it's maybe not even a separate issue, but it's flipping the other side of that thing of, well, how do I get people into systems with sort of the reasonable controls around, making it easy to get in, and even maybe beyond that with, not just the usernames and passwords, the authentication piece, but the authorization piece of, in my career, I think about a little bit of story time. The most successful project in my career that I think I could point to was one about, it involved identity, but was a lot about roles and authentication. And the technology parts of it were hard, but it was working so that in this company, people who showed up on their first day of work could get into systems, and there weren't like 100 tickets that had to be created, or talk to Bob because he knows what you need, and that's this.
Well, I was gonna just make fun of you that this was like the pinnacle of your the best project, but that's actually a noble, like, for people to have a good experience,
right?
So I in my mind I retract making fun of you for that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So
so can we like put out like a layman's term to each of these things?
Yeah, can I, when we share slides, it's not always universally, it's not always universally loved, I would say, but here,
okay, bring it up and let's do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take a stab at how I would explain this to myself, because I'm too dumb to understand a lot of the big words you use.
All right, where are we here?
Okay, well, while you figure out how to do slides,
Yeah, no
I'm going to
joke.
talk through. So to me, authorization. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So my authentication is basically like proving that I am who I say I am, and for various ways of complexity and to varying degrees of certainty. That's really what it's about. And then authorization is, now that I have proven who I am, I think of it as entitlements. Like, what am I entitled to access or see or do or move, or right? That is an entitlement.
And hopefully not just because you're Aaron, but because of what you're here to do in the organization, or those sorts of things.
Right. There's different complexities to that, but you can kind of think of it like that. And then directory services, which I hate, is like information about me. Like, and I'm this is one, and people probably don't like this. I think directory services shouldn't be in identity and access management. And we can
interesting
fire that up later.
Wow. Yeah, that's that's a hot topic. Okay.
But it's like information about us. And I've seen varying degrees of like just enough directory services to, do proper authentication and authorization, all the way to my social security number, my home address, my phone number, my whatever is.
We're using attribute 27 in Active Directory.
Yeah.
And that's your boss's pet's name.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and the user management is just, like our ability to, I think of like reset my own password or create an account based on certain things. So,
right.
I mean, that seems pretty simple, like when we explain it like that, but why is it so much harder than that?
I think this whole, my theory would be because, and I come by this honestly because I was an Active Directory administrator early in my career. I think for so many traditional companies, this topic is Active Directory for the most part. That I think the directory services and authentication services and is really combing. Like I think a lot of people would struggle to separate authentication services from directory services and
Sure.
also from authorization services. And so to think about metadata synchronization is like,
you're using a lot of words here.
yeah, well, what I'm saying is like, I don't know,
It's
there's
too
just
much.
there's
Yeah.
stuff in Active Directory, and I have passwords in there, and I say, I create groups and say what groups you have, and there are these attributes that I can set. It's not, this, like, why do I even need to separate out any of this stuff? It's like, for most of us, and maybe it was that case going back to NetWare before Active Directory.
I love NetWare's directory services were the best.
Yeah.
They beat Microsoft hands down.
Yeah. Well, I used anyway, that story time is too
I'm gonna get hate mail later.
No, I'm going to talk about other directories, but people will start twitching. Like, yeah. So, and then user management. You said directory services should be separate. What about user provisioning and deprovisioning? Do you think that's part of the same? Actually, let's dig into that. They should be separate. Like what? Why?
Well, I think identity is a problem, a challenge space that we've built over 30, 40 years. And people treat it like it's a project versus a practice of like, oh, we're going to do a project and solve identity and access management. And I think there were attempts at like there's this idea of just having like one ring to rule them all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We're gonna have perfect data quality in one system, and it's going to be the master record for everything. And I'm not saying that it theoretically can't happen. I'm saying that it's so impractical that it just doesn't.
Yeah.
In most cases. And I'm more interested in the 90%, not the 10% who like get that right.
Right.
And so I think directory services should be an HR thing. And that they should be the stewards of that data, and that we should link to it. Like why should I like ingest that into my identity system and try to clean it up for them? Like I think you've said this, like the people who know the people are not IT. Like we're the people who know the systems.
You've heard me say that, and no disrespect to my HR friends, but HR departments are just terrible.
Yeah, well, Brian, you can only solve so many problems in life, okay?
they're so bad at. Yes, they should know who they should know who the people are and something about them and what, but they're
but what makes you any better at it as an IT person? I mean, do you get the time to do? Is someone like carving out your times? Like you're a redundant HR department.
You've got me. The fundamental problem is HR knows somewhat about the people, and IT knows somewhat, you would hope, about how would I have a system that I could query and interact with other things, and our inability. And this to me gets to the heart of the premise of why identity and access management sucks. In companies, I think it has a lot to do with the almost total lack of communication and
expectations
agreement between it. I don't know how you do this without the two organizations,
right? Like working together.
Yeah.
But I think here's where part of the problem comes in. This is where we can have our argument, because you got to stop agreeing with me about stuff here. Is we like in IT, like we're like problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
And so we create these great systems, and I would say AD is one of them, but I don't really feel that way. But anyways, let's say it is. It's a great system, but it has poor data quality because the people put data in, like garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And instead of taking this line of like, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, we're like, we're the hero.
We're gonna fix
this issue.
Yeah.
by taking over somebody else's responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think it hurts our organization's growth and maturity in the long run when we as technology practitioners start stepping into other people's worlds versus creating education and
Yeah.
pathways and opportunity to help them grow. And I think identity and access management is a company problem, not an IT problem.
Yeah.
And we got to take that approach to it.
Yeah.
You get me all fired up about this
What
now.
can I disagree with you on that? Dang it.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah, I mean it's an enormous problem. It's a big part of why it sucks. And I can represent um my tribe and say HR doesn't get called and screamed at by a nursing manager in a hospital when
mhm.
their nurse has been on the job for 2 weeks and can't log into the medical records system. Like,
Yeah, but I bet they'd be better at the data if they did get that call.
yeah, but I lack any mechanism to. Here, let me just go ahead and forward that call to you, and the
Yeah, but
HR
you're
department
a
will say,
parent. You've raised kids, right?
yeah.
Like I assume you've been a reasonably responsible father. I mean, like how effective are natural consequences in modifying people's behavior?
They're good, but natural consequences in an organization. People think in IT, when you get calls and you're not solving people's issues, you're being passive aggressive. Like you just
There
got
you
to
go.
suck. Yeah, you got to
Then you
suck
own
it up.
directory services and you need to be better at HR than HR does. Because if you're
Yeah,
going to take that perspective and you the help desk is the sole link in the connection of this
yeah,
organization's success around identity, then you just created a culture where IT does own it and it is
yeah.
your problem to solve. And you can complain all you want, but it's not going to get any better.
Well, and I think I think you're right, and this is where we suck, where we make in IT our own challenge worse is because if we start with that premise of, well, I can't fix HR's data quality, and because I'm talking at HR people, like the kinds of when I say HR data quality, what I'm talking about is human resources. Like, well, what job do they get hired into? It's
Mhm.
that, and especially in a larger organization, it's totally rant. Like
Mhm.
it's like nurse role 7, and we're like, what?
What does that mean?
Like
Yeah. So
what?
maybe you need an organizational psychologist to solve
Yeah,
this problem, not a
yeah.
security architect.
No, I know. But and it's like, yeah, go figure that. And like, that they, create the job descriptions, or HR has this like, well, when do we have to get data into the system? People would be shocked. Like it's a week and a half sometimes before people
Mhm.
even put the data in the HR system because that's when we'll need it for payroll. But
Right.
meanwhile, it's like, and I think we screw up in IT by its codependency by
It
saying,
is. Yeah.
okay, so call the service desk and we'll figure it, we'll set it up for you. Like we put ourselves in this loop of like, we're going to solve this through human effort by call
Mhm.
the service desk.
Inspect
Have
quality back into a broken
correct.
process.
Yeah, have your manager put that in where all of this, none of this is going to be good. We're not going to achieve like day one access with human effort. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
simply, I've
Nope.
never seen it in an organization, and certainly not accuracy and quality. Like that's going to have to
Well,
come from,
and as security practitioners, how often do we say like security is not security's job? Security is everybody's job.
right.
And
Yeah,
what that
sure.
means is, right? What that means to us is don't click on phishing links and take your security awareness training.
Yeah,
That's
right.
really what we mean when we say that.
Correct.
This is a practical way of putting into place security is a we thing, not a me thing.
Yeah.
And you own accurate directory services. It's just an uncomfortable conversation. And I get it. I think maybe I get it, but I think directory services has got to be an HR thing.
Gosh, man, that's depressing.
Um, okay, we got like 10 minutes, so let's roll through some other. I'm
Yeah.
gonna make some other like real authoritative statements, and then you can disagree with me.
Okay.
I
But
think Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think authentication services should be centralized.
You think I'm going back to here. You think authentication services should be sent? What does that mean?
So, like we've gotten into this world where we have 14 different
Oh
systems,
yeah.
and each one of them's performing their own authentication and their own authorization. And like then when you try to correlate user behavior and all this jazz, you're doing it from all these different systems. And I think authentication services are easy to centralize and there's great standards around it. And the authorization should be decentralized. That should be embedded in each system of what entitlements you have. How do you feel about that?
I think the skills of this are beyond most organizations. Like,
So just go create 50 different credential databases and
well, I
have at it.
I've seen success. Like, I think you're smoking. Where I think you're smoking something on this is that most organizations can pull that off, and
I think you're wrong.
most organizations can pull off Active Directory and point everything back to Active Directory, except when they can't, and then you're kind of stuck essentially. And so
Yeah, but Active Directory is a form of centralizing authentication.
it is for authentication, and
Yeah.
then it's the like the authorization. I guess it flows out that way of like, here's my username and password. Now, what is that username and password?
But you have to drive a stake in the ground somewhere
Yeah,
of like, hey, what does good look like? I'm not even talking about perfect. Good looks like we have one authentication database
yeah.
and we have, our MFA and our monitoring and everything on it. But if you don't pick that, like this is aspirational for us, you're never going to get around to a project where it's like, finally, we have 18 months and $10 million and we're going to go centralize our authentication. This is a practice, not a project. And if you don't
Yeah.
have like these essential guidelines of your practice, it's just not going to get better as you go.
I think I don't agree with your premise that there are, like, when you say there are like 200 authentication systems out there, like, okay, Aaron, yeah, like there's a badge access system that the physical security folks get into. Why do I care? Like, I could, again, my practical experience is I could go tie that into Active Directory, and that's going to be 1,000-hour project that just creates a bunch of misery for me. Like, I think there are very few. I think it's very hard to build and keep those integrations in place in your average corporate organization. Like,
So then what you're saying is it's just a free for all. Just everybody can add anything they want wherever they
yeah,
want.
I think what I've landed in and I'll admit to, I've had success with roles. Authentication has always been tough in organizations, and the closest I've come to it is I put together a standard, and this maybe gets back to the little bit of the, I was a little passive aggressive, but it's like, here's the standard, here's the stuff we support, and if you go and buy a system that can't follow by these rules and pointing, in my case is always, it's pointing to Active Directory, like,
Which is fine because
I
you
can
can
do
have
I can do Kerberos, I can do Radius, I can do like, here are the protocols that I can support that get you back into Active Directory, and you got to do one of those. And if you don't, and if you do, here's how you do it. And if you don't,
yeah, and you have to be, but if you're just
good
like
luck.
if you don't have that standard of like we expect you to integrate
Yeah.
with our centralized authentication services, then everybody's adding everything everywhere. I mean, we see this all the time of like, did you know that you have 270 different credential databases on your network? And they're like, no, we don't. We use Active Directory. And we're like, list. And they're
Right.
like, who added that stuff and when?
Yeah.
If you can't integrate it, I get that. Like, I'm not delusional that you can have 100% compliance towards this. But if you don't set it as an expectation that you're going to attempt for that, especially with new systems, like maybe you can't go back and groom all your old systems into this, but at least when you're building a new one, why wouldn't you shoot for it?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just creating a problem for somebody else in the future.
Yeah. Well, how do we make this suck less? Like, I think,
with orchestration.
okay. So step one, orchestration. Tell me more.
Well, let me go back to this isn't a project. This is kind of a process or a practice. I
Right.
think it's setting some minimum standards. Like, let's not get academic about it. Like, we shoot for as few authentication databases as possible. Okay. We um do role-based authorization. To your point of, like, let's spend a little bit of time, create some very simple base accounts, and then tie that to job roles. I understand that's hard and that's going to take a conversation um, with departments that we don't have control over. But I really think, and I don't know, I think you agree with this, getting that correlation between HR and whether it's your help desk or whatnot, provisioning it, and then embodying some of those standards or base accounts in an automation platform that can tie our HR system, our authentication system, our authorization systems together. So we're at least building some consistency in that each we're not making these artisan or bespoke account profiles for everybody that comes
Yeah.
into the environment.
Okay. I'll go and say, I agree with you that orchestration is one of the ways, like focusing on orchestration. That's one of the ways we're going to make it suck less. I think another one, it's embedded in what you said, but I think phasing is an absolute key to making this area suck less. And so, like you talked at the beginning of this conversation about, I'm going to go do this mammoth like I'm going to go solve all of it. And that's like what I've seen always. It's like, I'm looking at this one system, whether it's SalesPoint, Okta, whatever Microsoft's calling their identity services stuff these days, but I'm going to spend $1 million on and I'm going to solve this whole wheel of pain basically. And I've never seen success with that.
Nope. Yeah, I agree with you.
No, decide is password security the thing that's most important to you? Is provisioning the most important thing? And you may even have to break up provisioning and say birthright day one access versus that everybody gets versus the granular access to systems. Or is it about enabling customers and partners to have better identity and access, or what? And break it into, you got to go break it into chunks.
Yeah, and that makes me, I can't remember the book. It was like Good to Great or whatever that sequel was or whatever. But they talk about this concept of like these teams of explorers that went to the South Pole, and one of them, they would like hunker down, wait till the weather was good, and then try to make these big runs at, like, we're going to do 100 miles in a day or whatever it is. And they ended up all dying. And then there was this other team that was basically like, we're going to do 20 miles a day.
Yeah.
Whether it's raining, snowing, whatever, we do our 20 miles. We're not going to go further because we know we're going to use up too much of our time and supplies, and we're not going to go less. And for me, identity and access management is a 20-mile march kind of thing.
Yeah.
That we got to figure out these day-to-day practices that we can start building good into the environment with the account you provision tomorrow.
Yeah.
Not continuing to wait another 18 months until we have a project to just redo the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's related to what you just said, but I think another key success factor, and I wish I had a science to it, but I don't. I think it's an art, but it's find that balance between when do I build upon, when do I gradually improve the things that exist today, and when do I do business process and role read is, can I, so where can I use that metadata that I have today to automate, and when do I have to go and like dig in and do a whole redesign? Because that to me, I think has killed some of the, you finally get like, I am going to get HR involved, but it's like step one, redo all of the
redesign everything.
That's
it's a non-starter.
It's a non-starter. It's not going to work. By the time you get done with that, all the roles that
Microsoft has renamed their identity platform 7 times, and you can't have it anymore. No, I'm picking. So I think we should, like, there's some practical things in each one of these areas that I think are like some quick start things. I don't know what you think, but maybe in future episodes we like dig into like practical things you can do today in each one of these areas.
Yeah, I like it. That's it keeps me from having to think too much about topics, but I think that's a good area to dig into, and I can find more areas where you're wrong if we dig into. Yeah, sounds good. All right, great conversation today.
See you, man.
See ya.